Well, hello, it's Ryan from Puff Adder Speed and Fabrication. I want to make a quick video, or actually this isn't going to be a very quick video at all. It's probably going to be a pretty long one. Installing a Jackpot 2 with the drive-by-wire throttle body on a test engine. This is a 6.2 liter LS3. It has an LS7 camshaft in it. Some good heads from Hooper's Heads down in Houston, Texas. And a few other odds and ends and a balanced rotating assembly. It runs pretty good. I've had it on the run stand, and I've run it with Jackpot 1 with a cable throttle body a few times just to heat cycle it and make sure I've got good oil pressure and stuff like that. But I've been doing it a fair amount of tuning lately with the Jackpot 2 and drive-by-wire, and there's some questions I have, and so I just happen to have an entire Jackpot 2 setup to include the PDM. And I want to go through setting that up with everybody and then also have a discussion about what I found and on some pitfalls that are really easy to avoid and to ensure that you end up with a good solid install that works, runs, and is pretty easy to tune. My experience with Jackpot is a lot of the tuning philosophies are pretty much in line with Holley and HP tuners, which are the two I'm the most familiar with. The biggest challenge is finding out and figuring out where all the stuff is in the software and exactly what means what. You know, what relates to Holley, what relates to HP tuners. I do want to say that a long time ago I took a fuel injection course through a company called HP Academy. They're out of Australia, I believe, could be New Zealand. And it was a very good course. It did not teach you the specifics about software, but it taught you a lot about how engines work and how fuel injection works and fuel injection strategy. So let me give you an instance. I have a theory, probably not a very good theory, but I have a theory about all the dudes that have problems with kill shot and running kill shot. I think that's two things. I think one, they don't set up their distributor correctly. And it's very, my experience has been, especially using similar systems like Sniper, is that if you don't set the distributor up correctly and use, and make sure the strategy that you're using, whether it's mechanical or vacuum advance off the distributor or letting the computer control it, that you know exactly what you're doing and you set up your distributor correctly. But the other thing is those folks running small blocks and big blocks, we'll call them old school, if you will. Carbureted engines from the factory tend to run very large camshafts. So when they run these large camshafts, they have a lot of overlap. Fuel injection does not like overlap. So if you have fuel injection in learning mode, and you have a lot of overlap on your camshaft, okay, you have your lobes of your cam or intake and exhaust lobes are closer together. There's a lot of fresh air cycling through your head when the camshaft is overlapped. So you may have, let's say, a pretty common small block Ford camshaft. I can't remember if I think it's the XE262 or 265 comp cams. That has 25 degrees of overlap. So at idle, you have a ton of fresh air going into your combustion chamber, and your system looks like it's reading very lean. So it starts pumping fuel in it, and it starts running completely rich, fouling spark plugs and doing all kinds of stuff. Well, to avoid that, you have to take it out of learning and closed loop compensation mode and tune your idle below, I usually use 1100 RPM. So below 1100 RPM, you have tuned it just like you would a carburetor, okay? What I found on the last small block Ford I tuned, at idle, the system showed it was 21 to 1. But when I tuned it with the vacuum gauge, that was the best place for it. It didn't burn your eyes out of your head, and it idled very well. And then, as soon as you get out of idle into cruise mode, light throttle, or full throttle, make sure it's turned back on in learning and closed loop comp mode, and you don't have a problem. The beauty of the LS engine and what makes the LS engine so good is that, or not, one of the reasons it makes it very good, is that they came from the factory fuel injected. So most camshafts especially you know, anything probably I would argue a stage 3 and below, have very little overlap, especially if you well, just look at it. You'll see. You can get a cam that chops really well that doesn't have a huge amount of overlap. But without overlap, like this cam, I think has maybe 2 degrees. I can't remember what these have from the factory, but they're very, very low and very easy to tune at idle. And you can just leave it in learn mode. You just set it up, put your AFR at whatever you think it should be, 14.1, 14.3 to 1, and fire it up, and it will do very well. Last thing I'll say is, don't forget modern fuels have about 10% alcohol in them from the factory, okay? I'm not from the factory, but from the refinery. So storage on straight gasoline, 100% gasoline, is 14.7 to 1, right? So if you have regular pump fuel from the pump, 14.1 on E9, or I'm sorry, gasoline 90, so E10, which is what you're really getting is E10, right? 10% ethanol. You're going to end up with a storage of around, I believe it's 14.1. At least that's what I've seen on what most of the fuel injection systems tend to like it. Between 14.1 and 14.3. So if you're running 100% gasoline, 14.7 to 1 is storage. But when you're running E10, it tends to be closer to 14.1 to 14.3. So you have to take that into account. So if you set your cruise up for 15.5, so 14.7 at idle and 15.5 at cruise, which is really lean and really factory-esque, and then you put E10 in it, you could find you have a lean stumble at cruise. Look up. Well, what I like to do is set it up at cruise at 14.7 and idle at 14.1 in the beginning. Usually ends up about 14.3 if you've got a cam with low overlap. Anyway, it's a lot of information open. The other thing I will tell you about ACES. So if I didn't introduce this, this is all about ACES. And that is that ACES base tunes are very rich and very safe. So in general, I use all stock cam profiles. No matter what cam you have, start with the stock cam profile. It creates a very rich, and on Jackpot, let's talk about Jackpot specifically. If you're tuning an LS engine with MPFI, multi-point fuel injection, and a cam with no overlap or very low overlap, stick with all the stock settings in ACES, and you'll have a very good tune out of the box. So with that, let's go ahead and grab our camera over here and do some checking. So what I've done here, I've already set up our just like you would a vehicle. So our engine is set up just like your vehicle would be right before you install your fuel injection. So I've already installed my O2 sensors. See the angle of the O2 sensors just slightly above parallel to the deck so that moisture and condensation doesn't sit inside the O2 sensors. So we've got our O2 sensor plugs. We have our map already installed. Coming off the back there, it's a little cheater way of doing it. Just put it right in the end of a hose and shove it kind of in the back. We're not going to use an oil pressure sensor. I've got an oil pressure gauge set up over here so I can check my oil pressure mechanically. You do not need a oil pressure gauge. It is absolutely optional. We've got our coolant temperature sensor. We've got our inlet air temperature. We've got our 6-pin LS2. This is a 790, ends in 790 throttle body. And then over here we have our drive-by-wire pedal. Now I've tested ACES and Holley with 2 different pedals. The one that they recommend, which ends in 038, and that's the CTSV pedal, and then this one. I believe this one is an Impala SS pedal, but it's very, very, very reasonable. I don't know, $75 from Rock Auto, and they work great. They've got a great mounting surface, and they fit in a lot of different varieties of cars. So we're going to go over on how to set that up and do a little testing. They're very touchy, so I'm going to test and see if we can slow it down so it's not so touchy. And I've got our Jackpot 2, you'll see right there, Jackpot 2 set up. Way I like to set up, I mean, obviously this is a very staged setup on a run stand because I use it to test all my engines, but I've got a Corvette Corvette fuel filter. So it comes in 58 PSI. ACES is set up to run 58 PSI, so that's 4 bar, 4 atmospheres. And I've never really worried about changing it, only because 58 PSI, 4 bar is a great pressure to run fuel at. Atomizes really well on big injectors, and it just works out. It just works out really good. So here's our return, here's our feed, and then obviously it comes up and goes into our fuel rail. So we are all set up for fuel. We have 60-pound Deca injectors. These are, no kidding, actual 60-pound Deca injectors, Bosch Decas. So I recommend you always know what kind of fuel injectors you have. One of the things I'm going to show you how to do is how to set up your injector off time, and that really, really helps your tune get there faster, okay? Self-learning systems will compensate for differences in injector off time, but it takes a while to hit every cell in all of your VE table, and so it's just to learn it all. So I like to set it up the best I can. So I make sure I have injector data. So I'll do it 2 ways. For GM injectors, I'll get injector data out of Holley, your Terminator X or your Terminator HP or Dominator software. You can download all those softwares for free, and if you open them up, I'll show you later on in the video, but you can see the injector off time data. You can get that directly from the software, so you don't even have to go searching for it. But if you use FIC injectors or Deutschwerks or anybody else, they have the injector off time because they provide all that information, so you can use it with your Holley, and then you could just take the information and input it into ACES. So it works out pretty good. Let's see what else we have. So we've got our 4X cam sensor up front here because it's a Gen 4 motor, and then our 58X crank sensor, which is back there. Quick note about LS versus Gen 3 versus Gen 4 motors. Obviously, you probably know, maybe you know already, that it's a 58. Gen 3 motors were 24? Why am I drawing a blank? 24 times crank sensors and 1 times cam sensor, but they were 12 volt reference. So these sensors were 12 volt reference sensors. Vice on the Gen 4, they're 58X and 4X on the front, and they are 5 volt reference sensors. So in general, for many years, I think since the mid-90s, most sensors like your oil pressure sensor, your fuel pressure sensor, your throttle position sensor, your map sensors, they all have a 5 volt reference. So they basically take a 5 volt signal and a ground, and then have roughly a potentiometer type situation on a TPS that turns, and then it references that 5 volts. So it applies, I believe, resistance between the two, and then so let's say 50% throttle position would be 2.75 volts roughly, or 2.5 volts roughly. You know, it just depends on how it's scaled. But anyway, way too much information, but only to say that that's the big difference. And I learned that the hard way, because you can't cross cam or crank sensors on Gen 3 and Gen 4 motors. If you do, they won't work. You can rewire the sensor on the Holley motors, Holley ECU stuff, and that is actually a Holley ECU wiring harness schematic. It blew off the wall and ended up in the back of my son-in-law's truck. But you can rewire that from a 5 volt to a 12 volt and use the same harness for a Gen 3 and a Gen 4 motor on a Holly. I haven't looked into all of the wiring harness specific for the ACES to see if it's easy to rewire, but it really doesn't matter because ACES gives you harnesses for the Gen 4 and Gen 3 motors. So it makes it super duper duper super easy. So when we go over our wiring, my preparatory wiring, I like to run our hot wires. So we got our hot wire that runs up to a circuit breaker, and then our 12 volts. So we've got a 12 volt battery right there, and then we've got our ignition switch right there, and then we've got our ground right there. Ground is run directly to the battery, and your hot wire going to your PDM is run directly to your battery. Normally I would use fork terminals for like I have on the end of the ignition wire, but I'm out of the larger gauge wires, so I'll just stab them in there. And then the other two wires that we're going to use that would go to the vehicle for our test is our fuel pump. So our fuel pump wires. So we've got our 12 volt positive and our 12 volt negative to our fuel pump, and then you could see they just run down here to our fuel pump right there. That's a Quantum Fuels 340. And then I think I've got a 1.5 gallon crusty tank there. Sorry, everything is so dirty. I blew out all of my expansion joints in my shop. My shop is only a couple years old, but they had never cleared out the expansion joints. So when I blew them all out, it just blew dust everywhere. So my shop is horribly dusty. So that's kind of where we sit to set up. So to recap, we've got a 6.2 liter LS3 engine out of a 2011 Camaro that came to me in pieces and half screwed together. Somebody had put it together with red Loctite, so I was able to use heat and whatnot and a whole bunch of helicoils to put it all back together. Had the rotating assembly balanced with some new pistons, 20 over, and then it's got a LS7 cam as discussed earlier, hoops heads. They got an awesome logo right there, and then it's got trunnions and good lifters in it, and just a very solid good running engine. And lastly, to recap, we've got some 60-pound Bosch Deca 4 injectors. So I think that's the basis of the setup. So I already have some of the things out of the box and over there on the engine already. So I already have the Jackpot ECU, I already have the PDM and the O2 sensors, and then what is this though? That's the PD. Is that the PDM? Oh, that's the CAN bus harness. I don't really buy the displays because I really don't use them. Once I set them up in the car, I just use a computer. But I do buy the Bluetooth CAN bus. So the Bluetooth CAN bus connector, so I can connect it to my phone, and they just stash away, and you can use your phone as a display. So that's an extra one. If you'll see, I've got a Gen 1. That's my Gen 1 Jackpot that I use to run normally on the run stand. Again, this is set up for our test here with our drive-by wire. So that's all of that hardware and an extra. This is a cable to connect your computer. All systems come with that. So let's go ahead and drag this over to the side here. And now we will look at exactly what we have, and then we will use it. We will install as we go. So right here, this is our map sensor. I already have one from the Gen 1 over there uploaded. It's exactly the same one, the 1036B. Okay, so I'll put that in there. And then I'll grab our next set of wires just to see what we got here. And some of these wires we don't use because ACES comes with both Gen 1 and Gen 4 stuff. So right here, this is so it says 58X. This is our NOx sensors, right? Our KS NOx sensors right there. On the Gen 4 motors, the NOx sensors go right down here. So the NOx sensors are on the lower side of the block toward the rear on both sides. There's the other one right there. Now I'm not going to install them for this because I don't need them. I'm not going to be running such that I need to worry about NOx. So I'm going to, if I'm not going to use something, I'm going to put it here in the box. Now I do want to say this. instructions. I'm a firm believer in following instructions. Okay, you really, in general, can't go wrong with following instructions. Also, when I'm doing a new install, especially on somebody else's car, I'll print the manual out, and even though this is a Jackpot, 90% of the stuff is the same between the Jackpot 1 and Jackpot 2. I'll tell you some differences that I've learned here in just a second. But then what I do is I write on the back of it notes. Okay, so if it's for a customer, I'll put the car, I'll put the name, I'll put the date, that kind of stuff. But the first thing I always note is injectors. So what injectors are we installing? What's the part number? And what's their rating at 4 bar? So I say 4 bar, 58 PSI, because some injectors will be rated at 3 bar, 45 PSI roughly, 45 and a little bit. Okay, so when you get your data, make sure you convert it to 58 PSI. You can go to Deutschwerks or FIC. There's calculators where you can get the flow rates at 58 PSI. So you can convert to whatever it is. If it's 43 PSI, if the ratings, if it's 50 pounds at 43 PSI, you can go to a calculator, plug it in, and find out what the PSI is going to be at what the flow rate would be at 58 PSI. So, if it's, let's say it's 50 at 43, it could end up being, 43, not 45, I'm sorry. If it's 50 at 43, it could be like 55 at 58. So 55 would be the number that you want to use, okay? So I haven't, wrote the information down from our deck as yet, but I was just setting this up to show you what it is. So let's start real quick before we go back over to the wiring harness and go through the first few pages of the manual, okay? So you get it, table of contents, overview. This is good stuff, just tells you a little bit about the system. Don't get too tweaked about it, but I've highlighted a few things that you should think about. The system is designed for stock and mild cams. Okay, we already discussed stock and mild cams, right? A little natural aspirated, a little bit of boosted, and a little bit of nitrous oxide. Okay, if you are not an advanced tuner and you don't understand the concepts of putting 15 or 30 pounds of boost into an engine, I don't recommend starting right away doing that. Okay, start with 6 PSI, nice and safe, where you can't hardly hurt yourself if you got good fuel. Okay, but remember, this is designed as it comes out of the box for stock, mild cam, naturally aspirated, boosted, nitrous oxide, GM, LS engines. Okay, MPFI. Now I did see, I think they have a Hemi version of this too. RTV is terrible for your engine, and in general, an LS engine needs 4 drops of RTV. And that is at the corners of each one of these pan, of the pan, right here, and the front cover, right here on the front cover on the other side, and the same on the back cover, it's up here, okay? Don't slather up a whole bunch of RTV because you don't need it, and it is terrible for your oil. It gets caught up in your oil pump, but also it can destroy O2 sensors, okay? And you don't want to do that. One of the things I thought that was cool when I read the manual is right here it tells you a 58X sub harness is 5 volts and the 24X sub harness is 12 volts. I got to tell you, I emailed Richard Holdner back in 2016 when I was having challenges building my first few cars, and he said, man, sounds like you're mixing up 5 volt reference and 12 volt reference with your 58X and your 24X sensors. And sure enough, he was absolutely right. Okay, fuel system requirements. Fuel system, 58 PSI, okay? And says it right here. System requirement of 58 PSI, 10 micron post filter after the fuel pump, and a 100 micron pre-filter before the fuel pump. What I tend to do is, I'm not gonna lie to you, most of the time for stock and mild builds, without boosted, I just run the Corvette fuel filter and just run 1 filter. That's all the factory does. So, especially if you have an in-tank fuel pump and you have a sock on it, I put clean fuel in it, and while the run stand looks a little dirty, it is crystal perfectly clean on the inside. So I'm not worried about, the fuel setup on it right now. So clean fuel through the Quantum 340 liter per hour pump, and then through a Corvette 10 micron fuel filter. We talked a little bit about orientation of the O2 sensors to keep keep condensation out of them. And then, as I understand, I haven't done too much work, but I believe these are off-the-shelf O2 sensors that you can buy anywhere, which is nice. A little bit like the Terminator as well, but not so much like the Holley HPN Dominator. Those are very expensive, unique O2 sensors. So I appreciate that about ACES and Terminator, that you end up with some very reasonable O2 sensors. Do not use electric fan outputs directly to power fan. It must be ground triggered relay. Okay, so when you put this all together, you should use relays. Okay, now the PDM has some fan relays in them, so you can use that, or you can wire your own. But the biggest thing is that these ECUs don't have huge drivers to pump a bunch of power out of them to power different things. So always use the ECU and the PDM to a certain extent as a trigger. The PDM does, like I said, it does have 15 amp, up to 15 amp, I believe, single circuit relays for stuff that's a little bit lower. This is your wiring output schematic that we don't need to really take too much of a look at, but I usually start right at the top, okay, when I'm installing the harness, and we just go right down the list, okay, and then I'll take a pen and I will literally check it off as I connect things. But again, we haven't gone through and determined which stuff we are going to use, okay? So the next one that came out a little earlier is our crank and cam sensor harness, okay? There's two of them in here, and there's one for a 24X, and there's one for a Gen 3 24X, and then a Gen 4 58X. This is the 58X. So I'm gonna put this over here because we're not gonna install it right yet. We're gonna get all of the right harnesses separated, and then we're gonna do some installs, okay? So our next one coming out, we're gonna look at it. This is our sensor harness, okay? This is going to have our IAC, so that's your idle air control motor for a drive-by cable, your throttle position sensor for a drive-by cable, okay? And then your MAP sensor, manifold air pressure sensor, and your inlet air temperature sensor. Now I'm not going to use this particular sensor harness because this particular sensor harness has a Gen 3 type map on it, and the map sensors that ACES send you, which by the way is so awesome that they send you one that's calibrated. You don't have to worry about it, and get one extra. It comes with it. I'm sorry, and you could see, I think you might be able to see it, but it is a Gen 4 connector. It is not a Gen 3 connector, okay? So we are not going to use this particular sensor harness. There'll be another one that'll come up here pretty soon, and we will use that one. So we're going to go ahead and stick that one in the little magic box. Then we're going to go to the next one, and our next one is our cam and crank sensor. But if we go look at the base tag, this is for our Gen 3 motors, 24X. And as we discussed, we're a Gen 4 motor. We already have that sensor harness, so we're going to put that one over there. Our next one that we're going to pull out is our coils. So this is our odd bank, okay? Our odd bank coil harness. So we're going to put that right over here and go forward real quick. Let's go over our setup. You have a driver side and a passenger side. Your driver side on the LS engine is 1357, and your driver side is 2468. If I make mistakes, I normally put those backwards. So quite often, 50-50. I won't pay attention to what I'm doing, and I will end up with something that won't fire, and it's because I've got the banks backwards. So let's talk a little bit about these. The Jackpot 2 comes with a Gen 2 harness. That is a Gen 1 harness. And I'm going to compare the two here in just a second, what I'm going to get out when I get to the actual harness. I'll compare the Gen 2 and the Gen 1. But the cool thing is ACES includes the harnesses, the main power relay and the fuel pump relay to literally convert a Gen 2 harness back to a Gen 1 harness. If you use these right here, and you install them correctly, you do not need to use the PDM. So some people will do that. The PDM is actually a very slick model. Their labeling is not really intuitive, and a lot of folks have challenges because the labeling is not intuitive. So it's pretty easy. They give you a bunch of little trinkets here. You got a grommet, you got some feet for your ECM if you want. There's a little keychain, and there's also an adapter right here that adapts USB to USB-C. You can't see it, it's in there, but that's to update your handheld. If you want to, if you have one. I don't have one, so I've never had to open it. I've got a couple of bags there that I haven't used. Okay, this is our our intake air temperature sensor. They give you an intake air temperature sensor. We're not going to use it because I'm using, in general on the run stand, I don't use them anyway, but I already have an inlet air temperature sensor right here. It's a GM one, and we'll just use the GM one. The calibration is the same, and the plug is the same, so we'll just use that. This is our loose wire harness right here, and this has all the extra wires that we're not going to need. Okay, so this has all of your fan relay, oh man, there's so much. There's a whole sensor out stuff. There's your brake switch for all your transmission wires, so your vehicle speed sensors, your brake switches, your extra ground triggers. There's just so much stuff for all that. But since we're running on the run stand and we're not running anything extra, we don't need this to make the truck run or make the car run, except for the brake switch. There's a brake switch, there's a brown brake switch wire in here. That's the only wire that you actually need, if I recall, to make this whole darn thing run. So, you know, we're going to put this inside, and we're not going to use it right now because we don't need it. We'll pull out our next harness here. Let's see what we got going on. This is our electronic throttle pedal. Okay. And they give you 2 harnesses. This is $300 worth of harnesses from Holley. So they give you, the pedal is the long one right here, to an 8-pin. So this is for an 8-pin drive-by-wire throttle body. And if you go back over here, it's called the ETB. So if you see them, the electronic throttle body is what this is. So 2, 4, 6 pins. So we're looking for the 6-pin one. I highly recommend you do not try and, we talked about following the directions. Follow the directions, and when we get to them, I'll show you. Follow the directions and use the throttle body that they say. Every throttle body is different, and the size of the butterfly is different, and the scale on how the air flows through the throttle body is different. So if you're guessing, it's going to be very hard to tune. Okay, and I don't even know if electronically, I've not seen a lot of aftermarket or, you know, a secondary market type, I don't even know what it's called, but, you know, a Dorman, instead of using an actual GM throttle body. I just use GM throttle bodies. I'd rather use a used GM throttle body than a new Dorman or something else and risk it not working, because drive-by-wire is very sensitive to originality. So again, I've got a LS2 throttle body over here, throttle body off of a GTO, and then our pedal, like I'm kind of going against what I said, because 038 CTSV is the pedal that they that Holley and ACES has said to use with their systems. But Dr. EFI, he was the one who turned me on to this, or at least he didn't specifically, but you know, on a forum posted that this is a great substitute pedal, and it works very, very, very well, and it's much easier to package than the CTSV pedal. So, all right, I can tell you right there, that's a Gen 4 map connection. So there's the map, and that's the Gen 4. So the rest of this harness right here is the one we need. Now, we're going to pull this out, and we're going to look at it real quick. There's our map. We will be using that map, but it has the TPS and the IAC. This is for drive-by cable. You will not use these if you're using drive-by wire. And then this is our inlet air temp, okay? Inlet air temp. So we're going to lay this one over here, top of that. We're going to pull out our next one. That's our coil harness for our even coils, 2, 4, 6, 8. and then there's our ground wire on the end. Very important that you always ground, okay? Come back over here, and then this looks like our ETB, our electronic throttle body and pedal assembly, okay? And it'll say it right on it. This is our pedal sub harness. So drive-by wire and pedal harness, okay? So we'll loop it up here so we can see that it has the 6-pin. See, it's a gray 6-pin, and then our pedal connector. So we'll loop this up. We're going to put this one right here. Now we are almost to the main. This is our transmission harness, okay? And we're not connecting our drive-by, or we're not connecting a transmission, so we're going to put this one in our box. I'm going to pull out our next one, and this is our, let's just look at just to show you, but I can tell you it's our fuel injection harness right there. And I usually get the EV6. I like the EV6s because if you get any of the adapters for like the trucks or the EV1s, they're short and there's no wires. So always buy an EV6, and then just buy the adapters if you don't want to rewire them to the plugs, because they work the best. But if you want to go to EV1 to Multec or Multec to EV6, the adapter is a wire, so between the two plugs. So if you go to Michigan Motorsports or anything else like that, you end up with the wire. Get EV6. So we want to put our harness over there, and now we are down to our main harness. So this is our main Gen 2 harness, okay? The other thing about ACES that is very cool is they include your power adapter for your alternator, okay? So what you do is you hook this to your alternator, boop, and you just connect this to 12 volts somewhere. So connect it to a switched on, and it will excite your alternator, and you will have power. That's a $25 part from Holley. You can also, if you don't want to connect it to a power wire, you can put a resistor in it, and it will excite it as well. But there's no need to. Just run it to 12 volt switched, and you will have an alternator. I'll show you. This is my truck right here, and it's got a B15 motor in it. But you can see the wire. This is it's a single wire coming out of the alternator, and then this just back feeds to 12 volt. This is on Holley with a single turbo. This is a 24X motor, and then the GM is running my 4L80. So anyway, this one's always being futzed with and stuff like that, just because I use it to learn a lot of things on. So very cool. So now we have our Gen 2 harness. I have laid out our Gen 1 and Gen 2 harnesses on the deck here. So this would be our Gen 2 right here, and this is our Gen 1. So let's start with our Gen 1. So our Gen 1 has a main relay right here and your fuel pump relay, okay? And then this is your fuel pump out right here from your relay. So your orange wire out from your fuel pump, okay? And then these three wires here feed your main power and your 12 volt trigger. So here's your 12 volt switched, okay? And our main power that goes directly to the battery. This is a Gen 1 harness. We are not using Gen 1, okay? We are going to be using, see I've labeled them, put connectors on them because this is my run stand harness, and this is the only three wires I use on my run stand because I have a fuel pressure switch on that I wired directly to my run cart, so it's very easy. But you can see, here's our main fuses right here, and obviously our main connector and our CAN connector. But all the way from the end here down is the same, okay? Whether it's a Gen 1 or Gen 2. There might be some differences over there. You can see that's probably a drive-by wire. This is not a drive-by wire. This is a drive-by cable harness. So that's let me make sure that's a drive-by wire. I bet it is. Yep, electronic throttle control right there. So now if we come over here and we look, so I'm gonna go like this and just look from this side. So do you see those relays and fuses? So two relays right there, and 2 fuses right there. There's no relays and fuses up here, right? No relays and fuses. Here's our CAN connector, but no relays and fuses. So all of these wires right here, okay, go to our power distribution module. Sorry. So these 2 wires, these are our 12-volt main, which they call V main, and our ground, okay? This one right here is our ignition switch. So this is when the PDM turns on. This turns on, tells the ECU to come on, and then it sends a ground trigger, okay, out this. This is a ground trigger. So main relay, orange wire, connects to the MRD on the power distribution model, the PDM. It is a ground trigger. If you hook 12 volts to this wire, if you put this on ignition switch, I can almost guarantee that your brand new sweet jackpot will no longer be brand new sweet jackpot. Okay? This is a ground trigger. This goes to ground, a ground trigger, and then this one goes to your ignition switch, and then this one is a ground fuel pump trigger. Okay? So that's the 5 wires we are going to use, and we're going to connect those 5 wires to our power distribution module right here, okay? And we're going to connect these 3 wires to our PDM, and then we are going to connect these 2 wires to our PDM, and we will have everything that we need to make this work, okay? So the difference again between the Gen 2 and the Gen 1, Gen 1 has your relays built in and your fuses built in to the harness, whereas the Gen 2 does not. Makes for a very clean install. I don't think it runs any less wires because ACES also use ground. So with for your fuel pump, you've got your your fuel pump positive and your fuel pump negative, whereas most every other PDM is just going to be a ground trigger out, and then you'll run your positive to your relay. But the nice thing is it has the relays built in, and then it has your fuses, 15 amp fuses and 30 amp fuses. And so laws of physics still apply. You can't these ignition switch 1, 2, and 3, those are, I believe, 1 amp. So those only have 1 amp outputs. If you try and hook a fuel pump directly to this that draws 10 amps, you're going to have problems. All right, you're going to have problems. All right. So your V main 1 is run off this fuse. This is going to be our ECU power right here. This is the V pump. That's our fuel pump. And there's 2 extras that you can use. And then these would be fan relays. And I'm not running fans on my run stand, so I'm not going to show you that. I'm just going to show you how to wire your fuel pump, how to wire your PDM to your ECU, how to install your harnesses on your engine, and then we're going to fire it up and tune it. All right, we're back over here at our instructions, and we have our main harness, and we're going to go ahead and start by connecting our main harness to our ECU. So I'm going to walk over here, and so we've got our main harness again over here, and we're going to go ahead and connect that to our ECU. So bear with me one-handed. I have moved the ECU to the other side because the orientation is slightly better. And we connect it like that, and then it's got this sweet OEM style latch, pulls over and latches right to it. So our harness is installed. I'm going to drag it up here just a little bit. Again, I've never installed the Gen 2, so I don't know lengthwise how we're sitting. There'll be lots of zip ties in a few minutes. You'll be impressed. You'll be impressed. So there's our tack out. We don't need that. We're not going to use that. I'm going to pull all of these wires back up. I don't normally cut wires on the run stand, so I won't be cutting any wires. I'll just be adding some forked terminations to them here in a second. All right, let's go back over to it and look at our instructions. And our first instructions say our oil pressure sensor. So oil pressure sensor is optional, but it is awesome because it gives you ability to log oil pressure. Again, I have a manual oil pressure sensor, so I'm not going to be wiring that one up. So no need to plug it in. But if you did, you would come back here And the oil pressure sensor, there's fuel pressure. The oil pressure sensor wire is right here off the back, oil, and that would go right to your sensor that could be right there. And again, you can lengthen it and run your oil pressure sensor anywhere else. There's a bunch of places to get oil pressure. So now we got a coolant temperature sensor, CTS, right? So we're gonna find our coolant temperature sensor wire, and we're gonna get that mounted. Now it's right up here, so for the life of me, we'll have to see where it is. I think this is it right here, CTS, and there it is. So CTS, and it's also by the fuel pressure sensor. We're not going to be running a fuel pressure sensor, so it doesn't really matter much. So we're going to kind of untangle it here a little bit and then loop it around and over here. So throw that up there. We're going to come back over, and here's our coolant temperature sensor, okay? We'll run it through there and plug it in. Be smart on what we're working with and plug it in right. What am I doing? Coolant temp sensor. There we go. All right, coolant temp sensor. So we'll go back over to the instructions, and we take our pen and we said oil pressure. So now we check off coolant temp sensor. Now we're going to do our wideband sensors, wideband 1 and 2. So we're going to go back over here, and we've got our wideband connectors right here, wideband 1, wideband 2. We'll put, this is our even bank, so we're going to put wideband 2 on our even bank, which is this side right here. Connect it like such. Okay, connect that one, and then we're going to go over here and we're going to connect this one. Now we will be zip tying all these things up in a few minutes, and again I apologize, I'm doing this by myself, but I really wanted you to see connecting every wire so you can see just following the instructions of what this looks like. Okay, so connect wideband 1, connected, clicked. Okay, so remember, we're going to zip tie all these things up and out of the way here in a little bit. All right, we're going to come back over to our instructions, take our pen, and we're going to check off wideband. Our fuel pressure sensor, we just talked about that. A fuel pressure transducer connector is here. It is optional. We do not need it. We do not need to make it run, so, but we're not going to install it. Okay, and then there's a little discussion about using 1/8 inch 27 NPT sensors, and that's a good one to use. All right, our map. So we're going to plug in now our Gen 4 map sensor. To do that, we need to use our Gen 4 map harness. Let me find it here. There it is. So here is our sensor harness. So we're going to go ahead and plug in our sensor harness. So come over here, and that's our injector harness, our ignition 2468, ignition 1357, and then we keep going, and this is our cam crank, and then we go up to this one. There's our electronic throttle control, and then that's for the additional wires. So we just got to keep looking. We just haven't found it yet. So that is not it. 246 sensor. So there's our sensor connector right there. I just missed it a minute ago. So we'll connect that one to here. Okay, connect that one. And then we go down, we find our map wire. So there's our Gen 4 map. And then again, this is our ACES 1036B. And we're going to plug that one in right to our map. So there's our map sensor. Okay, I'll plug that one in there. So there's our map all plugged in. All right, back over here, check off our map 4.5. Again, here's where it talks about the sensor sub harness. Okay, our camshaft position sensor and our crankshaft position sensor. So now we come back over here and we grab our cam and crankshaft position sensor sub harness right here. We come back over to the back and we find cam and crank. So there's There's cam and crank, and here's our sub harness. So we're going to connect these two together, and this is going to have to loop around to the front of the motor, okay? Because our cam sensor is on the front of the motor. So what I like to do is pull it back around this side over here. So let's get our cam sensor hooked up on the driver's side of the motor, and then our crank sensor goes down here. Now, because this is always on the run stand, I tend to do this, but normally I often hook this up before I put the starter on, because you can see it's a tight squeeze. It's a pretty tight squeeze back there. No matter what, it's a one-handed deal, so it's kind of interesting to try and do this with the camera, but you just kind of work it. See, look at that, right in there. I think you can see it. And there we go. There we go. So there's our crank sensor. It's got a little heat shielded on it. Come around here. Probably could have came underneath. Wondering if I should go underneath it. Let's see if the length of our cam sensor works. So here's our cam sensor wire. We'll run it down underneath of our injectors. Oh yeah, plenty of length. So I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just gonna take it here and plug in our cam sensor wire. So we got plenty of room. And again, this one right here is our fuel pressure sensor. We don't have one. It could be anywhere in a fuel rail. Could have put it right there, but we don't have it or need it to make it run. All right. Come back over here. So we check off our camshaft, check off our crankshaft, flip it over. This is our sub harness for Gen 3. We're not using Gen 3, we're using this one for a Gen 4, okay? And we have already installed it. So now knock sensors, again, I told you we're not gonna use those because I'm not actually driving it, so I'm not worried about whether it's gonna knock or not. It's not gonna knock on the run stand, okay? Flip it over here to our page 12, and now we are at ignition coils. All right, connect the ignition coils into each bank. The driver's side connecting. See, if you read instructions, you can never screw it up. The driver's side connector should be labeled ignition 1357. The passenger side connectors are 2468. So make sure these are properly connected. If not, the firing order will not concur. Damage could result. I've never damaged anything, but I've had a lot of non-running vehicles because I've done this part wrong, okay? So we are just using LS coils. These are LS3 coils right here. They've got the right connectors. The early LS1 connectors, early LS1 coils are not compatible. They have a different plug on them. So again, this is cool. ACES includes new coil harnesses. If you get Holly, you reuse this piece is reused from your stock your stock old crusty LS harnesses. So I don't know, it's pretty cool. So all right, so 1357. Again, we're going to read instructions, and read instructions says that the driver's side is 1357. So we're going to come back over here, and we're going to go to the driver's side of the engine, and we're going to lay this in there like such. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect coil 1 to coil 1. Right. Come on. What am I doing wrong? In general. There we go. There's 1. There's 3. Okay. And then 5. 5 on that one. Okay, and then 7. All right, now we've got this done. While we're here, okay, I like to tuck this one down there. We're going to go ahead and put our ground wire on because this one frequently is forgotten, okay? And you have to ground this. This is another reason why it will not fire. So I go ahead and just ground this straight away, right? Just ground it straight away. Just get to acceptance on it. Ground it straight away. Pull it. Kind of usually face it toward the middle, and then we're going to connect it right back there. So let's go ahead and get our ratchet. And then all we're going to do, just, there we go. Tight, okay? We're gonna go over here, put our ratchet back. We're gonna grab our passenger side coil harness. Here we go, 2, 4, 6, 8. We're gonna do just like we did before, okay? Gonna lay it out here. And we're gonna go ahead and connect coil 2 to coil 2. All right, coil 4 to coil 4. Oftentimes, if I'm building a motor for somebody and sending it to them and I test fire it, I actually write the numbers on the coils, 2, 4, 6, 8, just so they don't get confused. It's very easy. No matter how many times you do these things, it's very easy to quickly, not pay attention to detail and run across something just because you've done it so many times. So we're gonna go ahead and put that one on. I like to tuck this harness down here. Okay, right. And then we talked about going ahead and knocking out our ground. Now the ground is a little bit buried, but we can move it somewhere else. This is plenty long enough. So I just had the bolt in there because that's where I had it before. But what we can do is we can go ahead and we could just put it out here. So we're gonna go ahead and run it into this one. I've chased all these threads, so hopefully they're good and clean. And we can run them in. There we go. Get it run down. It's gonna be the longest video ever. My hat's off to anybody who actually watches it. Appreciate you. Just want to help some folks out because I really believe that this system is a great buy, and I think they run they run great. So. All right, grounds are done. So let's go back over here, and we can mark off something else. So there's a whole discussion about the ACES coils. I've never used them. I'm sure they're just fine. I usually just use LS coils because I'm cheap. All right, I'm cheap. All right, fuel injectors. We had a big discussion about fuel injectors earlier. These are the ACES fuel injectors. I've never used them. Why? Because I'm cheap, right? And I can get cheap GM injectors, OEM performance injectors, from the junkyard, and I can supersonic, or not high supersonic, but sonic clean them, and I've got a little pulser and clean them up, and they run great, right? Or buy some quality ones, but there's nothing wrong with the ACES ones either. I just don't have a need for them. But here's our harness. That the biggest thing is make sure you know what kind of injectors you were buying. So same principle, right? We talked about 2, 4, 6, 8. So injectors 2, 4, 6, 8, and on the other side is 1, 5, 7, and then they connect at the back. So we will loop our injector harness over there. Again, because I'm wrapped tight, we'll start with our driver's side just like we did before, and here is our harness. So injector 1 goes to injector 1. I do like EV6s. So here we go. Here is injector 3. Bam, put that on there. Injector 5. Bam, right? And then injector 7. The black plug goes there. Bam, okay. So there's that one. Our connector's in the back. Come over here, and we'll start on this side. Things are starting to get busy because we got a lot of stuff going on. So I'm going to push this out, and then our injector 2 goes to injector 2. There, bam. And then injector 4. I don't know what it is, but man, when something clicks, you just feel like you've accomplished something when you hear that click. That's what I feel like. We put that on there, and then we come over here to injector 8. Now we plug in injector 8. Sorry if I missed any shot, but you get the point, right? It goes all the way over there. There's a mosquito in here. I wonder if you can hear that in the microphone. Anyway, here we go. There's our injectors, and then here's our injector harness, right? So now we're going to find our injector connector, which is right here. Injector. There's our injector harness we just put on there. Sorry for the close-up, but I got to put this together. And satisfying click of getting it all in there. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and connect. I should have connected before, but I didn't. We're going to connect our injector harnesses. So here's our injector 2468 to injector 2468. So we're going to connect that one to that one. Come on. Yep, there it went. Verify. Yep, boop. And then this is injector 1357. Or I'm sorry, ignition 1357 to ignition 1357. So we connect this one over here to this one. So there's our ignition. So now our coils are hooked up. So our coils are hooked up, and our injectors, sorry. Injectors are hooked up and our coils are hooked up. Oil pressure sensor we're not going to use. This is our knock sensor that we're not using. And this is our transmission connector that we're not using. And if you quickly look, we're running out of things to do, right? IAC, and we're not using, and the TPS, but we can connect our inlet air temperature. So we'll go ahead and loop this back up forward, right up to here. I think right there looks good. Again, I'm sure you guys are getting dizzy. I'm probably gonna get a bunch of this "you suck" comments. All right. Oh, look at that. That's a different IAC. So my IAC, the LX on this harness, the IAC, no, that's IAC, idle air controller motor. What am I doing? TPS, idle air controller, and here is the inlet air temperature, and it's the right one. What am I doing? All right, there we go. So that one's connected. Sling this up top so that way we can zip tie it up in a minute. Let's head back over here. So we did our fuel injectors. Pow. Okay. And then our handheld. Now we are not actually using the handheld. We're going to use this one. This is our CAN bus controller, and the CAN connector is right here. So we're going to go ahead and just connect these two right here. So this is our Bluetooth. We will use our phone as a handheld here in a little bit, and we will connect this one to, we'll connect this one to this one. So just click a little bit right in there, and now we're connected. All right. So now our handheld is connected 4.11. So now we're going to flip it over here and go back, and now we're to the loose wires. Okay. Ignition switch red should be connected to a clean crank power. But what we're going to do, this is where we're going to deviate, because this is the Jackpot manual and doesn't talk about the PDM or anything else. I didn't print those out because I just feel more comfortable just talking about it. Okay, I'm going to hook those up in a minute. We're going to go over the rest of the wiring harness. This is our your extra loose wires that have your things like fuel level. If you want to get a fuel level to feed into your ECU, your tack out. There's just so much stuff in it. Your fan control comes out of there. Your AC request. So when your AC is on, you can put an input into here that when you turn your AC on, it tells the ECU your AC is on, and it'll raise your engine idle speed and open up your IAC a little bit to make sure it can account for the increase of load on the engine. So your burnout rev limiter, your launch rev limiter, I've never hooked those up. I've never done a two-step on ACES. And then there's a few other things. But the biggest one is your brake switch. This is the one you need for your transmission. This unlocks your torque converters once it's locked. So you want to make sure you always hook that up. And then your extra vehicle speed sensor wiring. Okay. Transmission harness, so that's all the wires in this harness. Your transmission harness, again, it's just a GM transmission harness. So there's a main harness and then your vehicle speed sensors. And then we go to our drive-by-wire harness. Now we are going to be using that. So come over here, and if we look, we have no more harnesses left right here. We talked earlier about turning a Gen 1 or Gen 2 back to a Gen 1. These are the relays. I believe I already told you, but these are the relays, the 2 relays and the 2 fuses to convert your Gen 2 harness back to a Gen 1 harness if you want to. You throw those back in a box. Our last remaining wiring harness is right here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and connect it right here. Okay, and then our 6-wire connector right here, 6-pin connector is going to go to our 6-pin connector right on our throttle body. Okay, make sure I got it on there. I did not get it on there all the way. Come on. There it goes. All right, so our throttle body's hooked up. And then here is our, man, doing this by yourself is hard. If I had more friends. All right, so this is our pedal connector. Again, we've got our makeshift pedal right here. So we're going to connect that. Okay, it is on. It's a snug fit, man. They don't play no games with those. And we're going to put this back up here. We're going to zip tie all that up here in a few minutes. Okay, so that's it's ugly. I know it looks ugly. It's not designed to be installed with the ECU at the front. This would normally all be at the back. But anyway, all of our main harness connectors with plugs are all plugged in now. Now we get to start connecting wires to what would be to the vehicle. So we're going to connect, these are the wires to the ECU, but the first wires we're going to connect to the PDM are the wires that would actually come from the vehicle, right? So our battery negative goes directly to our battery positive, which goes to our circuit breaker here. Okay, it's currently open. The button is out. You can see this is open. And then our ignition switch. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect those three. So I'm going to see if I can do this one-handed. So there's no magic of TV here. So our ignition key is right here. It's the one on the end. Okay, so loop our 3 wires up. And the first one we will connect is our ignition key. So those forked connectors are awesome. Can't wait for my other ones to show up tomorrow. There we go. And then our battery positive goes right here on the battery positive. Okay, battery positive. We can connect that. Just want to make sure I don't have it in too far. Forked connectors make this perfect, but without them, I'm always afraid I'm going to shove it in so far that that you end up, with the insulation being pinched and not actually connecting the wire. But I think we're good. Again, not my favorite, but next time you see this, it'll have fork connectors on the end. Okay. Now our battery negative, right? Again, this goes directly to the battery. I put a circuit breaker on the hot side. All right. So now we're connected, and if we did it all right, just those 3 wires, now we should have power to the PDM, okay? So we're gonna turn our main breaker on. I have this, I've got a lot of safeties on the run stand in case things get nutty. So I've got this one, then I've got a main power. I'm gonna switch the main power on, and now this is my ignition switch. So we're gonna turn my ignition switch on, and now we should see these 3 lights light up. Nope, we don't. You know why? We didn't close the relay. I'm sorry, we didn't close the circuit breaker. So we close the circuit breaker, come back up here, should have a red battery in now. And if we click the ignition, bang, we got these 3 ignition wires. That means we now have 12 volts out on ignition 1, 2, 3. Low amps, 1 amp out on ignition 1, ignition 2, ignition 3. Great for flipping relays, okay? These are great for flipping relays. So now that we know we've got this all hooked up correctly, battery in, okay, so let me shut the ignition off. We have battery in, it means we got power. That one is always lit up. And then we flip our ignition switch on, bam, we got those 3. Life is pretty good right now, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and open back up our relay while we continue to connect more. Bow, okay? So the next wires that we are going to hook up are, let's put our screwdriver right here. The next wires we are going to hook up are two main wires. So this would be our V main, what they call, this is going to go to V main 1 right here, okay? Right there, V main 1. And then our ground wire right here can go to any ground, any G and D. They're all the same, any G and D. So there's ground there, ground there, ground there, all kinds of grounds. There's a ground right there. So we're going to put it right there to the first one, okay? And then our main, we're going to do that one last. This one right here, the red one, is our ignition switch. So this is going to go to ignition switch 1, okay? Then our MRD, this is 12 volt, right? For our ECU that tells our ECU to turn on and sends a ground trigger here, and the ground trigger comes back into the relay and then turns on the power out to V main, okay? Ignition switch turns on the ECU, which sends a ground trigger out to the MRD, main relay, main power relay, okay? Which then turns on V main 1, the V pump, V main 1, V relay 2, and V relay 1. And so you'll see all those light up here in a minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put some fork connectors on these wires real quick, and I will be right back. I'm back and I've cleaned these wires up a little bit. I added some forked connectors on the front of the small wires that I have fork connectors for. So the orange wire is the ground trigger main relay. The brown wire is the fuel pump. This comes from the ECU to tell the fuel pump to turn on. And then the red wire is the ignition switch. That's what tells the ECU to turn on, which then sends the ground signal out back to the relay. And then we have our 12 volt V main right here. I cleaned them up a little bit. I'll add some more zip ties here in a few minutes to get them even a little bit better. So we're going to do some more one-handed action. We will go ahead and connect the orange main relay. It goes right here to the MRD. Let's see if I've got it loose enough. Get our MRD connectivity right there. All right. So we are now tightened up. Right. So orange wire, main relay, MRD. Right. Let's get the little red wire. That's our 12 volt ignition. So again, that tells our ECU to turn on. So we go here. We're now going to connect that wire to ignition switch 1. Okay. I didn't heat shrink these, so I'll get those heat shrinked. You can see I heat shrink that one, but I didn't do those two yet. When I get the rest of the connectors here, I'll do that. So here is our relay pump. So see right here, relay pump. So this is going to turn the relay on. Pow, right there. So we're connecting that. All right, turn that tight. Bang. So now we got our relay. All right, now we need our red wire here goes to our V main. So we loosen up our V main right there. Wish I had a forked connector for that one, but we will just get her in there about like such. Tighten her down. Okay, pow, pow. Now we've got our ground, and we're going to run our ground over to this ground wire right here, our ground terminal rather, right there. Let's see if I can do this. Man, I don't not like not having fork connectors. It's just so much nicer with the connectors on the end. Hey ACES, if you're watching, put some darn fork connectors in, right? It's another 35 cents worth of stuff. I mean, you've already done so great adding an alternator, harness, and a few other things. Put some stupid fork connectors in there. Make life easier for the brothers out there. All right, okay, so we got a ground to ground. Now, through all of this, the one thing that matters is you do not put 12 volts to this orange wire. So orange wire is a ground relay, okay? So now we have our fuel pump wires to connect. So we're gonna come over here, we're gonna connect our fuel pump to V pump negative and V pump positive. Again, no, I don't know why they use V, they should just use F pump, right? Just make it easy. Just make it easy for everyone, right? Get over here, and so V pump positive, there. Make sure my glasses, I can't hardly see. You guys that are watching this, if you're young, good on you. If you don't have reading glasses yet, whew, wiring is the hardest with reading glasses. All right. Now we're going to put the ground. Again, we're going to go to the V pump ground right there. Okay. I've only installed one other PDM, and I'm doing this from memory, so we'll see how it works. We will see how it works. Okay. So now we got our V pump negative, okay? Pow, good and snug. A little snug test, boom, boom, doesn't come out. Okay, all right, so now we go back down, let's turn our circuit breaker back on. Okay, it's connected. Got our main power still on, our main cutout, main power, ignition switch. So now, look at what we have. Battery in, and now the V main is lit up, right? So ignition switch, everything is lit up. Oh. Now, I do want to say this. I had to use this ECU to check a client's so this does have a tune in it, but we're going to go through the wizard here in a second. So the reason this works already, woo, look at that. Man, it is so snappy. But the reason this already works is because there's already a tune in the wizard. All right. So let me go back over this one more time. Ignition switch is off. Okay. Everything is off now. So battery in. So when the battery is red, that means it has power coming from the battery, and that will always be lit. You turn your ignition switch on. It's gonna run 12 volts through this wire right here, and it's gonna turn on these 3 circuits right here, which is going to send 12 volts out of this into the ECU, 12 volts out of this wire into the ECU, which is going to then send a ground trigger back here to this relay, which is then going to flip all of these on and send 12 volts back to the ECU to turn on. Okay, so it just closes this circuit and runs from 12 volts to 12 volts here. When this circuit is closed, it just connects these two together, and now you've got all the juice coming, okay? Boom, look at that. Boom, reset. Our fuel pump's priming, and then it shuts off. And then, look at that. Oh, in case you can't see it, I'm actually doing this. Look at that. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and shut our ignition off, get everything back turned off. Everything is turned off. And by and large, we are ready to fire. Well, we're ready to hook up the wizard. So right now what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and go off camera, and I'm going to go ahead and zip tie everything out of the way to make sure nothing's in the flywheel and nothing is all over the place. Okay? Make sure that we're solid and set to fire. Okay? I just like to get my oil pressure right there. Okay, I'll be right back. So here we are, we're gonna go ahead and get started on running the wizard. I have moved the engine over by the front door of the shop in case we do start it. I'm not sure we're gonna get to that point, but in case we do, I have my phone open to ACES. So this is the ACES software on your phone, so it'll act just like a handheld. And I'm gonna go ahead and fire the ECU up. So we're turn our ignition on. And now our CAN bus is working here. And we're going to go ahead and choose Jackpot 2. So we'll choose Jackpot 2, check mark. Okay. And it looks like we might, can't tell if we're connected yet or not. 100 says 101 kPa, so I think we are. ACES Bluetooth, yep, we're connecting now. Whoops, get right up to it. Okay, there we go. So now we're connected. So now we want to run the wizard. So we go up here to our menu there, and we go to wizards. We go to start wizard. We want kPAs, and we want Fahrenheit, and we want cubic inches. Sorry for those that are overseas and whatnot, but I'm American and I'm not so good with the metric system. It's a great system, I'm just not so good at it. So we're going to go ahead and go to our next one. This is a GMLS. It's a 58 tooth. We're going to use stock cam. I like the VE tables for stock. It seems to work just fine. That's the right map, AE 1036. And if you're ever concerned, let me see if I can see it. You can come over here and you can look right on top of it. Part number is right there. It's upside down, but it is 1036, okay? Come back over here. We go right back on it. 1036. Dual widebands. Drive-by-wire, yes. We're going to use this pedal, 038, even though that's not an 038 pedal. It works. This is a 790. That's an LS2 throttle body. Transmission control, we're going to click no because there's no transmission. We got 8 injectors. They are, we're going to put 60 pound. I can't remember if there's 60 at 3 bar or 60 at 4 bar. So 60. So we set our fuel injectors to 60. If it's not right for 58 PSI, we'll fix it in the software when we upload the injector off time. So click OK. Changes our injector flow rate to 60. Go next. This is a 300. And we're going to go, whoops, it's backspace. And it is, I don't know, let's go 378. 376 normal, but it's 20 over, so we'll add 2 cubic inches. It'll be close enough. 378. Next, hot idle. I'm an 850 guy. So we'll back it up to 850. Okay. And 18726543. That's an LS firing order. It's not the same as small block Chevy. So just know that. I don't believe. Nope, it's not the same. 18726543. I don't believe. Go, engine type LS. This is just gonna, you can just look through it if you want, and then we click save. And then we go OK. It's gonna overwrite what's on there. And now we are done with that. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook it up to the laptop. Okay, so now I've connected our cable. So I've disconnected our CAN bus. And I've connected our computer cable. So our computer cable is now connected to the ECU. I'm going to connect it over here to the computer. See, it has a blue and a red light. We're going to go back over here and turn everything on. Okay, so before we get going, we're going to go ahead and grab the injector data that we need out of Holly. Again, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So I like to just use information that I have, that I know, and that works. So we're going to go ahead and open up our Holly V6. This is for HP and Dominator, but it really doesn't matter. You can also use the Terminator software as well. We will open up it doesn't matter, just open up a tune. And then we're going to go to our system and config. And now we should be able to see different injector sets. So come here and look at all these injectors that you can get injector data from. Okay, now a lot of them are Holly injectors, and there's your GM injectors. But what we can do is you can see right there, 60-pound Simmons Deca 4 injectors. You got to choose the right one. When you choose it, this gives you the information. So this is a 60-pound injector, 60 pound at 43 psi. Okay, so we're going to want to convert that to 58 psi. But in the meantime, we're going to get our injector off times right here. Now, Holly does things in volts. ACES does things in millivolts. So you have to add 2 zeros to our chart. Okay, and because I can't remember, I think it's like 896 or 809.6, 11.2, and so forth. I'm just going to write them all down because I can't remember off the top of my head. But I'm gonna write on my chart, my page here, for 8 volts, it's 1.42, and then 88. And I'm just going to write the voltage first. 88, 9.6, 10.4, 11.2, 12.0, 12.8, 13.6, 14.4, 15.2, 16.0, 16.8, 17.6, 18.4, 19.2, and 20. Now we're going to write down our milliseconds. That's our off times. So we already wrote down 1.42, so it's 1.20, 1.02, 0.90, 0.82, 0.74, 0.68, 0.62, 0.56, 0.50, 0.44, 0.41, 0.39, 0.35, 0.32, and then at 20 volts, it's 0.28. So it should make sense, right? The more voltage that's applied to the injector, the less off time is. The off time is the amount of time that when voltage hits it until it's open. Okay? Does that make sense? So it takes time. Everything doesn't run perfect, instantaneous. So at 20 volts, if you have 20 volts of juice going to that injector, the computer is going to say, okay, I need to calculate for a 0.28 millisecond space before the injector actually puts fuel into the combustion chamber. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and close this out. And now we're going to open up a browser. No, we don't want to save anything. And we're going to find out what it takes to um, to convert a 60 pound at 43 to a 60 pound at 58. Okay. So I always just go fuel, injector, pressure, calculator. Calculate, enter, and then injector versus flow. This is a good one. So old injector rate, I think, yeah, pound per hour. So we go over here, and our injector flow rate is 60 pound per hour at 43 and a half. That's 3 bar, and we're going to change it to 4 bar, which is 58. So we calculate. So our new pressure is 69.3. So do you see how you can make you can get a little more juice out of your fuel injectors if you're up in the fuel pressures? We're going to go ahead and connect to Jackpot 2. Let's enter. We've got our ignition on already, so we're going to connect to ECU. All right, we've connected successfully. Click on the gear. We should see 378 cubic inches. It didn't update our injectors, but we're going to go ahead and fix that here now. So we said our new injector rate is 69.3. So we're going to correct that to 69.3. Enter. All right. And now we need to correct our injector off time. So we're going to go over here to our fuel. And then we're going to go to our X point. And so at X point right here, and now we have to fix our injector voltages, right? So you can see it's 6,000, 8,000, 10, 12, 14, 16, but that doesn't align with the data that we have. What we're going to actually do is we're going to start at the top and we're going to look at our list and we're going to start with 8 millivolts or 8 volts, which is 8,000 millivolts. So we're going to put 8,000 millivolts and then we're going to skip one on our list. Okay. And we're going to do 9.6, which is 9,600 millivolts. And then we're going to skip one on our list. And the next one would be 11.2, so 11,200 millivolts. All right. And then 12.8 volts, which is 12,800 millivolts. We're going to skip one, and then we're going to do 14.4 volts, which is 14,400 millivolts. We're going to skip 15.2, and the next one would be 16, so 16,000 millivolts. And then we're going to skip 16.8. And the next one is 17,600, 17,600. And then, so we'll skip 18.4. And then the last one we'll use is 19.2, which is 19,200 millivolts. So now our battery voltage is correct. I'm sorry for the foul up on that. So our battery voltage, we will now be able to have our scale match on our injector off time. So now, if we go back to our one-dimensional table, you'll see here injector off time, our battery voltage has changed. And so now it matches what we put, 8,000, 9,600, 11,2, and so on and so forth. So now we go back over here to our 8 volts, and at 8 volts, it's 1.42 milliseconds, but we got to convert it to microseconds. So microseconds is 1,420 microseconds, right? So we go 9,600 millivolts is 1.02 microvolts, which is 1,000, I'm sorry, 1.02 millivolts, which is 1.020 microvolts. Okay. So you see, kind of see what we're doing here. 11.2 or 11,200 millivolts is 820 microseconds. And then 12,800 millivolts is 680 microseconds. 14,400 millivolts is 560 microseconds. 16,000 millivolts is 440 microseconds. 17,600 millivolts is 390 microseconds. And then 19,200 millivolts is 320 microseconds. So again, we took that data, we took volts and millivolts from Holly, and we converted it to millivolts. Sorry, we took volts and milliseconds and converted to millivolts and microseconds in ACES. I know, but we did it. Okay, so now we're going to write this to ECU. Make sure I don't know if it does it automatically. Okay, so it's on. We're going to make sure we have that. And we keep going. Okay. Now the other thing is under because one of the things to do to help startup on these is to make sure you have your ETB gain at 35. And I believe it's under idle settings. And we go here, it's probably already at 35 because of the previous uh, tune I had in it. Let's see where is 35? Or I'm sorry, it's ETB max gain, I think is what it is. Let's see, is it down here? Oh, ETB max bypass air. See, it's at 18 degrees. Let's change that to 30 to 35 degrees for startup. Okay, that seems to help startup on the drive-by wires. So ETB max bypass air. So that's under your idle config right here, and then it's under custom item ETB max bypass air. Change that to 35, and that's going to really help. Um, it should really help start this. Okay. Written. So the first thing we want to do is ACES has a bunch of modifiers. So they modify the fuel table from stock, and it makes it a little bit more challenging to understand exactly what's being changed and what's being tuned. So I like to go through and correct those right out of the gate. So the first thing is there's these offsets where it offsets the value of the stock fuel table. It uses 90% of that value. So what I like to do is just to make sure everything is reading 100% kosher, I change the values of all of these three to 100%. And even though I'm only using, as far as I know, and ACE is only using the stock table because when I set up the wizard I set up, we're going to use stock for our VE for our camshaft, which refers to our VE table. We I believe that's the case, but I don't like to chance it. Okay, so the next thing I do is I like to go into our 2D tables, and we have our stock VE, our mild VE. You can see it's about 11%, 12% difference. And then we have our race VE, but there's a system default VE, and I'm not exactly sure what that does. But what I like to do, and I won't do it right now, but eventually I will make the stock and the system default VE match. Okay. But what I want to do is we did let it run yesterday for a little bit, and we let it learn some. So let's see what it learned. So we're going to go over here. We're going to click on the fuel self-learn table on the left. And I'm going to turn the heat map on just because it helps delineate where things are changes. So, and if we scroll down, we can see um, our idle area right here. It looks like it was adding roughly 7% to our fuel table everywhere. Okay, and that's on the odd bank, and this would be the even bank. So let's scroll on down and see how close we are. So that's a little less, about 5% on the even bank. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that 6% to our stock VE table. Okay, so we're going to go back to our stock VE table, and then we're going to go in the upper left-hand corner and then scroll down to the lower right-hand corner, and you got to go all the way over, all the way out, and then we're going to hold the shift button down, and then we're going to tap it, and now it highlights the whole thing. Now we're going to go into a cell, and we're going to right click, and we're going to offset selected. Okay, and we said we want to add 6%, so that's 0.06, right? Decimal point place 2 over for 6%. So we're going to multiply this whole table by 1.06. So we're going to go asterisk, which is times 1.06. So what that expression is it's saying take the whole entire table, we select it all, and we're going to offset that by 6%. There's a million ways you can do it. You could do plus 5%. I just like, I'm old, and I learned math in the 70s, and I like to set everything up like an equation in my head. And for me, it makes perfect sense. Times everything by 1.06. So now we click OK we click OK, and now it just changed and multiplied our entire table. I like to go up to the top left here and just see what it says. It was at 75 or 76 something, and now it's at 81. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, and the next thing I want to do is I noticed in tip-in, especially when it wasn't tuned, and I've tuned a couple of drive-by-wire cars, and the throttle blade reacts so quick that it really needs a good pump shot. So it needs some acceleration enrichment. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go to our acceleration enrichment table, which is in the 1D tables, acceleration correction versus TPS. Okay. This is going to add right now. It looks like it's adding about, uh, I'm sorry, uh, TPS enrichment versus cooling temp. So if we go over here, we look, it's modifying it by, it's not adding anything, right? So 100% means it's not adding anything. I just like to look through these. I get sometimes a little confused between Holly and ACES. Again, no hit on any one of those. But so let's go ahead and add a little more fuel to each one of these. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go for the first. I'm going to select the first one, shift button, and select 30%. And I'm going to go ahead and add, okay? Uh, I'm going to go ahead and offset that and add a 5%, right? So again, be very consistent. We're going to offset those first four times, right? 1.05, enter. And now it raised those all up. And just because I'm wrapped a little tight, I like to just pull this one up just a little bit to give it a little bit of curve. Let's go here to 1.05 and we'll just add just a little bit. So I'm using the up and down arrows with the shift key just to incrementally move it very little. Oh, there we go. And I'm going to hit the carriage return twice to get to this 100. Hold the shift button and we're going to lower that just a little bit, just to make the curve a little more smooth. Not sure that it matters a whole lot. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and save this file. So let's save it. Save this as run stand, jackpot by wire. This is for yesterday's. And I'll tell you what, so let's know. So this is a whole new day. We've made some changes. And what I like to do is write down in my notes what changes I've made. And we're going to go ahead and save this. Okay. And now that it's saved, we are going to write it back to the ECU. Okay, it's on, it's powered, and it's not running. So we're going to click OK. We're writing. Now, the first tune we're going to do, we're going to start up, and the engine coolant temperature is going to be pretty low. It's not going to hit uh into learning, but one other thing we're going to do, and we'll have to rewrite again, is I want to shut fuel learn off. I want to clear the fuel learn tables. Okay, we just went and added the 7%, right? We added that 7% so we could take it back out of the fuel learn tables. But we want to do some basic tuning to get the VE table pretty close, at least in the idle area. Okay, so how we're going to do that is we're going to use closed loop compensation. I'm sorry, Holly calls it closed loop compensation. Uh, ACES calls it injector loop compensation. We're going to use that number to adjust our table to get us pretty close. But since we've already accounted for this first bit of fuel correction, we want to go ahead and correct and oops, sorry, back over here. There we go. Let's close the 1D table, open up the 2D table. There we go. It's our fuel learns. And normally you would think you could just highlight one and hit Control A, but it doesn't do that. So highlight the upper left, go all the way to the right, and scroll down all the way. Hold your Shift button and highlight all. And then we're going to right click in one of these. I'm going to go fill same value, and we're going to make all that value 0. So now we've cleared out the odd bank. Let's go to the even bank, highlight the upper left, scroll all the way down to the right. Okay, hit the shift button, put our cursor in the middle here, right click, fill same value, 0. enter. Okay, so now we have zeros in our fuel learn table. So the learn table is doing nothing right now. So what we're actually seeing is what's in the stock VE table. That's what it's using to fuel, the ECU is using to fuel the engine. So we're going to go ahead and save it again so I don't lose what I'm doing here. And this is the 17th. Place it. Yes. Okay. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to turn off enable. Okay. We don't want to turn off fuel loop, which is closed loop, right? Open loop, closed loop. We want to turn off the fuel learn. So we don't want it to learn, but we want to see what's going on. And then we're going to use that correction to offset the entire table. Now, this isn't going to correct what happens up high, okay? The fuel curve, I'm sorry, the VE curve is based on whatever testing, and I'm going to make it a big assumption here that ACES did testing. It's whatever testing ACES did with a particular engine and a particular camshaft and intake manifold and all the inlet the intake, the air filter, everything, all of that matters on what your VE table looks like, right? But all we want to do is maintain a basic shape and get our idle correct. Once our idle is correct, then you go into doing, to a certain extent, the same thing. But the fuel learns pretty decent for a regular mild setup, especially a non-boosted one. Can't really hurt it once your timing is set and you just keep going. All right, so we're going to set that to off and we'll save it in a minute. But before we get going, let's just go take a quick look at our spark. Okay, we haven't talked much about our spark tables, right? So a configuration item, let's go ahead and hold this down. So we've selected 2D table, or 2D table was selected for us. Here's our rev limiter. Let's go ahead and check our rev limiter because that's an easy one to update real quick. Go down here to the lower left, click on rev limiter. Right now we're set to rev out at 7,500. Look, I'm a firm believer that nothing super great happens unless it's a race motor on an LS engine after 6,200. So we're going to set that to 6,200, and we don't have we're not using any of the two steps, so these to a certain extent don't really matter. All right, so I'm sorry. So back now to Spark. We're going to use our 2D table for Spark. So we're going to go ahead and lower that one and go back to our 1D. We don't need to do anything with our 1D, where we said it's 2D table. So let's go find our base timing. So there we go. So there's our base timing. So right now in the idle area, go down here. It's probably idling somewhere around 40 to 50 kPa. So it's somewhere in the 14-degree mark. And then it's cruising somewhere in the right over here, cruising somewhere in the high 30s there. And then once it gets to wide open, it is way down here. I'm sorry, we gotta go up here. Once it gets to wide open, it's up into the 23s. Okay. I like it to be closer to 26. I like it to cruise around 34 and wide open at 26. So this takes some work, but it's okay. It'll work. Our startup base timing. Right now, it's pretty it's based on engine coolant temp. So, let's say when it's cold, it's 70 degrees. So it's right here around 8 degrees. Usually I will make this whole table 15 degrees. And then our idle base timing, um, I believe when it's in idle, it uses this table. Again, I think it's very low. This should probably be 13 to 18. I've seen LSs do pretty good at that. So, and then follow base timing, I'm going to leave that alone. That's, I believe, as it's returning back to idle when you let off the throttle. Don't hold me on that. This is a follow base timing. I'm not super familiar with that particular concept, but you know what? Make our life easy, especially so it's not jumping around because you can see it's kind of all over. We've got our timing, our hot time. I'm sorry, our hot idle to 850. So we're going to highlight those two rows and make those fill same value, and we're going to have it idle at uh, 15 degrees. Okay. And then we want it to push itself up to 15 degrees. So when you increase torque by advancing um, the timing, it'll want to push itself up. Okay. So I'm sorry, it'll want to increase. So if your engine is constantly wanting to fight and increase idle, you can decrease your timing, and it'll reduce the torque and pull that idle down. So what I like to do just to keep it from dipping is I will make this um, the first columns right below it. I'm gonna make these 16 degrees, and then I'm gonna make this row right click, fill same value, 17 degrees, and then this one, right click at 18 degrees. Oh, highlight all of them, top and bottom, and then fill same value, 18 degrees. Okay. And then um, for all the way over here, I'm not, what this is doing, these low numbers are decreasing the torque very rapidly to get to um, to get to help it return to idle very fast. I believe at least that's one of the strategies. And I mean, in general, it's okay. You let off the throttle out wide open, it's going to retard the timing very quick and reduce torque very quick, and pull it back down as you see fit. So we'll leave the rest of those, but we want it to idle at 15 degrees. Okay. And then I like to do my startup base timing. We're just going to highlight and we're going to fill same at 15 degrees. Okay, this is a strategy that Holly uses, and I'm used to Holly, and it works out very well. It just makes it very clean because then you know you can see what's adjusting what. Um, it's interesting if you look at the curve on this. It's a it's an interesting curve in the way it goes. I don't think it's a bad curve. I just it's just always changing, and it makes it a little bit hard to kind of follow. But it's all goodness. It's very safe, right? We talk about being very safe. Right here, you're talking our max torque, our wide open is around 100 kPa. So we're running. Let's highlight these three rows over here. So wide open, let's go down to 4,000. So we're running anywhere from 20 degrees of timing up to 23, 24. That is super safe on an LS, low compression LS engine. And what I mean by low compression is it's not 11, 12 to 1. This is a 10 to 1 motor, so it's a little higher. So I don't mind it having a little bit lower, especially when we're just starting out. Okay. Remember, ACES sets all of this stuff up very, very, very safe. And if you choose a mild, your mild or race VE, it's going to do is just make sure it's even more rich at startup. Okay. Um, I didn't compare timing tables on the race versus VE. I think it's only, yeah, there isn't timing tables for race stock. And I said VE, but I meant timing tables for stock mild and race. So the only tables it uses, I believe, when you choose stock mild or race is your fuel tables, right? In this area here. Stock VE, mild VE. And my guess is, I don't know, if something happens, it uses this table. Okay. But that's the table I believe it's using for the VE. So we've now made a couple of more changes, so we're going to go ahead and save it. This is run stand jackpot to drive-by-wire. And then we're going to replace it. Okay. And then we're going to write to ECU again. Okay. So, all right. So this takes just a couple of minutes here. So, I hope you're finding this helpful. It's very long and drawn out. I know that, but I can tell you I like to watch videos and I like to learn. And so in general, if I'm going to make a video, spend the time to do it, I like to do it in the way I would like to do it. So feel free to let me know, um, what else I could add to these videos to make them to help you learn. This is about learning. Okay, it's about learning and being able to apply this information to broader, uh, more situations. So more different engines, different fuel injection styles, um, fuel injection types such as throttle body, um, fuel injection, and especially LSS makes it easy because timing and everything is handled off a reluctor wheel, and it's all kind of built in, for lack of a better word. When you get to distributor and that stuff is all adjustable, it adds an extra component of complexity. All right, let's go ahead and fire this thing up and see what we think. All right, let's go ahead and fire it up. I'm going to go ahead and cycle the ignition because we just got the tune all uploaded. There we go. You saw the throttle body cycle off, and there's no lights on the jackpot, so we are turned off. So we'll go back and we'll hit our on switch, our ignition switch. Always like to let the fuel pump prime, and now let's hit our startup. Come on. Startled me. All right. That seemed to start a lot better than yesterday. Okay. Already chopping at cold idle. Let's turn our water pump on. And then let's go back over here and let's connect our ECU. All right, let's go to monitor. All right, this went in a closed loop. You can see it. I just went in, well, half of it did. It's like one bank did. Exactly know where we're sitting. But our AFRs look good. There we go. Now they're both in closed loop. And now this went to correct itself. Interesting, you can see the banks, so there's quite a bit of difference between the banks. See, our bank 1 and bank 2, there's 15% difference. That makes me think we don't have a plug firing. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and stop and find my temperature gun and make sure all cylinders are firing. All right, let's make sure that we're firing on all of our cylinders here. We're at 529, 537, 563, 552. Okay. 530, 583, 559, and 540. Okay, so we're firing on all of our cylinders, so that looks good. Let's go back here. Our engine coolant temp is at 156. Let's go back over and look at our monitors again. Still quite a bit of difference between the two. So we're probably going to split the difference and add a little bit more. So we're going to, so right now it's adding 16 to 32% fuel. So we are going to go in and we're going to add, I'm going to add 20% fuel to the entire table. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and shut it off and we're going to do that. All right, so we went ahead and shut it off, and I've actually disconnected the injector plug because when you're cycling on and off, it gives a little shot, and that's why it backfired at startup earlier. So went ahead and disconnected it, and I've turned the key on, and now I'm gonna connect the ECU. Okay, and then again, because I always want to know that I'm working from um, the correct table, I'm gonna read, or the correct tune, I'm going to read the ECU. And then we said earlier we're going to add 20%, right? Let's see if we can get that down. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make the injector loop read somewhere around 100, okay? Somewhere around 100% is close. Plus or minus 5% is pretty darn good. So we're going to click on the fuel injector icon. Okay, we're going to go to our stock VE table. We're going to highlight the first one, the upper left, go to the lower right, highlight that one. Now we're going to right click and we're going to go offset selected. And we're going to multiply the whole thing times 1.20. Okay, now this is going to add 20% more fuel to our entire table. Okay, again, it may be too high up on the, but it's okay. We're just working in the main idler, and I could just change that just in the idle area, but I just don't like to change the shape of my curve right away. So now we're just going to save it. Go to run stand 17. Okay, click OK. Now we're going to write to ECU. Yep, it's powered on. It's writing to the ECU. All right, write was successfully. Now I'm going to turn it off, reconnect my fuel injector plug. All right, ECU is off. Fuel injectors are reconnected. Okay on the timeout. I'm going to turn it back on. Okay, it's back on. We're going to connect our ECU. Okay, we're going to go back to our monitor. Our engine coolant temp is at 158. So I click on our monitors and we're looking for closed loop and then our injection loop percentage. So we're going to go ahead and click the start button now. All right, it's already restarting remarkably better. I mean, remarkably better. It's still an open loop and it is idling great. Okay, idling pretty solid. Our KPAs are looking at our vacuums in a good spot. It's pulling a really good vacuum. You probably didn't notice it yesterday, but when we started, it was pulling at about 45 or 48 kPa. And so now here, coming up on 30 seconds, it should go into closed loop. We're still in open loop. Okay, the right bank is closed and the left bank is closed. And look at that. Might have overshot a little bit, so now it's pulling fuel, right? So it's pulling a little bit of fuel, but that is freaking awesome. 3%. 3%. Look at that. That is doing so good. Okay, somewhere around 5%. Let's give it a quick little rev. That's a whole big bit of difference. See how much better that is? We just added, I think, 5% more in acceleration enrichment. And you can see now if we're anything, we're about 5%, maybe too rich. Let's go back to our monitor, see what our coolant temp is. Coolant temp is at 181. Go back to our monitor. So we're at 95%. So I think that's where I would stay right there. Okay, so our engine coolant temp is getting up there, 194. KPAs are looking good. Let's go check out our injector loop is at 96%. Okay, and now let's go ahead and give it a couple of quick revs just so you can see it. All right, it did give us a little lean pop. So I could probably add more in acceleration enrichment, but let's go ahead and shut it off, and then we'll restart it again and see how it does. Just see how it does on a warm start. Okay, we are shut off. ECU is shut off. Let's go ahead and turn it back on. Look at that. Okay, it's probably still an open loop. Should be. We're timed out. Let's go ahead and connect to the ECU real quick. It'll happen so fast. It's probably, yep, see it's still an open loop right there. Now it just went to closed loop. Look at that. Pretty good deal. We're going to get one log before we shut her down. Now that we're in closed loop, we'll go ahead and give it a couple of revs so we can get that log with us, or get a couple of revs in our log. Okay. So back down. You can hear it has that little hiccup. I think that's in the follow-on air, so we'd have to figure that out. But I think that's a pretty good start. Some basic tuning gets us good idle, gets us real close. And now what we can do is we'll go ahead and stop our log. Come on. Let's stop our log right there. All this, we're going to go ahead and shut her off because I think she's getting a little warm. There we go. Yep, you can see I probably got a little on the toasty side with no fan on. Turn that 17. And then 17, enter. Okay, let's go to our monitor. I turn our main power back on so we can just see what our engine coolant temp is real quick. Oh yeah, 221. So I'll leave my electric pump running with my big barrel fan on there, and it will cool right down to not a big deal. So anyway, let me go ahead and hope that helped everybody out. Please, this is pretty long, and if you've made it this far, you're a rock star, and I hope that I haven't lost video, and I'm sure the audio is all jacked up. It just is what it is. I'm a older dude just trying to figure out cameras, and sometimes when it may be months since I've used it and I can't even remember how to connect the mic again. So anyway, thanks for watching. Look forward to the feedback in the comments, and anyway, I look forward to learning together. Thanks. Have a great day.